Does China still face power shortages today? Judging from overall data, China might be the country least likely to face power shortages in the world. In 2024, China's electricity generation successfully exceeded 10 trillion kilowatt-hours, accounting for nearly 30% of the world's total power generation, while its installed capacity reached an astonishing 3.35 billion kilowatts. But does China truly have no power shortages today? In 2024, more than half of China's provinces still faced power shortages. The three Norths region, Northwest, North, and Northeast China, is rich in energy resources but has low local power demand. Meanwhile, the eastern coastal and some central provinces, with their dense populations and developed industries, have high electricity demand but relatively scarce primary energy resources. Although projects such as transmitting electricity from west to east and supplying power from north to south have alleviated regional power imbalances to some extent, and although China's ultra-high voltage transmission technology is unparalleled globally, regional power shortage alerts still frequently sound during peak demand periods or special occasions. It is no surprise that resource-rich provinces have low demand, while high-demand provinces lack resources. This has long been a basic national condition. However, one name on the list of power shortage provinces is quite unexpected: Shanghai. With its small population, vast territory, highest proportion of clean energy installed capacity in the country, and over 90% of its electricity generated from green sources, Shanghai has become the only power shortage province in northwest China. The reason for this boils down to four words: green energy generation depends on the weather. Solar and wind energy, representative of new energy sources, are Shanghai's calling cards but also exhibit significant intermittency and volatility. Solar power stations only generate electricity during daylight hours and are affected by seasons, day-night cycles, and weather conditions. Wind power generation relies on stable wind speeds, and fluctuations in wind speed can cause significant volatility in power output, posing immense challenges to grid stability and increasing the unreliability of power supply. These factors have plunged Shanghai, which should have a power surplus, into a double-edged sword of summer surplus and winter shortage, daytime surplus and nighttime shortage. The province has even resorted to purchasing expensive thermal power from neighboring provinces to make up for the shortfall. On one hand, installed capacity is advancing by leaps and bounds. On the other, solar and wind power are experiencing intermittent indigestion. This is Shanghai's dilemma, and a challenge for China's power development. Is there a way to make these natural gifts more stable? For example, by having a sun that never rests. 37 years ago, the poet Hai Zi traveled to Tibet for the second time and passed through Delinga city in Qinghai province. There, he experienced the boundless desolation under the cover of night. The poet's emotions surged suddenly and abundantly, leaving Delinga, a small northwestern city, with the titles City of Modern Poetry and Capital of Romance. However, it is clear that Hai Zi did not gain a detailed understanding of the city's true character. Delinga means golden world, and here, the average annual sunshine exceeds 3,500 hours, with total solar radiation reaching about 7 gigajoules per square meter. Rain is actually an occasional gift to Delinga. Nestled between the Chilean mountains and the Gobi Desert, the City of Light is the true essence of this seemingly desolate land. And now, it is striving to realize its potential in an entirely new way. Today, if we drive west from Delinga along National Highway 315, we will soon see a 200-meter-high tower standing like a miracle amidst the vast Gobi Desert. At the base of the tower, over 27,000 heliostats turn like mechanical sunflowers, tracking the sun's trajectory, converging scattered sunlight into intense rays, precisely aimed at the absorber atop the tower. And so, the magic of energy transformation begins. Inside the absorber flows a special medium molten salt. When the molten salt in the tower is heated to over 500 degrees Celsius, it is transported through pipes to a massive thermal storage tank. This thermal storage tank is like a giant warehouse for energy. Here, the molten salt stores heat, much like how we deposit money in a bank. When electricity needs to be generated, the high-temperature molten salt from the storage tank is pumped into heat exchange systems such as steam generators. There, the high-temperature molten salt transfers its heat to water, turning it into steam. The steam then drives the high-speed rotation of a turbine, converting mechanical energy into electricity. After releasing its heat, the molten salt cools down and returns to its low-temperature state, flowing back into the low-temperature molten salt tank, to await being pumped to the absorber again to absorb heat. This cycle repeats endlessly, with a cumulative power generation of nearly 700 million kilowatt-hours. The annual electricity output is enough to supply 80,000 households. Each year, it saves approximately 48,000 tons of standard coal and reduces carbon dioxide emissions by about 124,000 tons. Sunlight, the towering structure, mirrors, and the intricate systems behind them collectively form the Qinghai Yongkong Delinga Tower-type molten salt thermal storage solar thermal power plant. Among the local residents of Delinga, it is affectionately known as the Second Sunday. In fact, this project, which began in 2013, and is the world's only tower-type molten salt thermal storage solar thermal power plant to achieve its designed output, marks the beginning of China's commercialization of solar thermal power. However, it is not the entirety of Delinga's solar thermal endeavors. In the same year, the National Energy Solar Thermal Power Technology Research and Development Center was established in Delinga, becoming the country's only national-level solar thermal RD platform, leading the efforts to domesticize key equipment. On June 30, 2018, China's first large-scale commercial parabolic trough solar thermal power plant, the CGN New Energy Delinga 50 MW solar thermal project, was successfully connected to the grid on its first attempt, making China the 8th country in the world to possess large-scale solar thermal power plants. 6 months later, the second phase of the Zhongkong Delinga Tower-type molten salt thermal storage solar thermal power plant was successfully connected to the grid, with over 95% of its key power generation equipment and technology domestically produced. By this year, one of China's largest under-construction solar thermal power plants, the CGN Delinga 200 MW solar thermal storage power generation project, is also expected to commence operations. Once completed, it will provide 1.8 billion kilowatt-hours of green electricity annually. It is these silver power plants that enable solar energy to break through the barriers of weather limitations and continue to flow even at night. While other renewable energy sources pause with the day-night cycle, these plants stand as steady sentinels, injecting a stable pulse into the grid with their 24-hour uninterrupted power output. Of course, no endeavor, no matter how promising, is perfect. Even the so-called second son of solar thermal power is no exception. Idealism may ignore costs, but true commercial operations cannot run on love. Economic viability is the first hurdle that high-investment, high-difficulty solar thermal power must overcome. According to a report by the International Renewable Energy Agency, in 2020, the cost of large-scale solar photovoltaic power generation globally was 5.4 cents per kilowatt-hour, while onshore and offshore wind power costs were 3.9 cents and 8.4 cents, respectively, and hydropower cost 4.4 cents. In contrast, the cost of solar thermal power was as high as 10.8 cents, far exceeding all other technological approaches. To overcome this hurdle, 3 solutions are indispensable: policy, technology, and scale. In 2016, China's National Development and Reform Commission officially issued the Notice on Benchmark on Grid Electricity Price Policy for Solar Thermal Power Generation, setting a unified national benchmark on grid electricity price for solar thermal power at 1.15 yuan per kilowatt-hour. This protective measure provided significant support for the large-scale construction of solar thermal power plants. However, starting in 2021, solar thermal power, having lost financial subsidies, was ruthlessly overshadowed by mature renewable energy industries such as wind and solar photovoltaics. In fact, from 2019 to 2023, China's solar thermal industry entered a period of adjustment in its strategies and models to find a path that balances cost and efficiency. After 2023, China's policy direction shifted once again. The country's broader energy strategy began to focus more on the balance and complementarity between the sources, grids, loads, and storage, exploring stable green power supply models integrated with wind and photovoltaic power generation became a new direction and opportunity for solar thermal development. More significantly, on November 8, 2024, The National People's Congress passed the Energy Law of the People's Republic of China, which explicitly stated the need to actively develop solar thermal power generation. At the same time, with further advancements in independent technological R&D capabilities, integrated solar thermal power generation with wind and photovoltaic power generation has become a new focus for this never-resting sun. The economies of scale generated by increased solar thermal capacity have also gradually pushed solar thermal power plants into a virtuous cycle of decreasing marginal costs. In 2025, Shanghai took the lead by proposing that the on-grid electricity price for commercial solar thermal projects be set at 0.55 yuan per kilowatt-hour. Although this price still includes protective mechanisms, it is expected that within 3-4 years, the cost of solar thermal power generation will drop to below 0.6 yuan per kilowatt-hour. Given its inherent energy storage characteristics, solar thermal power is expected to achieve a more reasonable ratio in future multi-energy complementary projects involving wind, photovoltaic, and solar thermal power. This will make solar thermal power more competitive, both in terms of peak shaving and economic benefits. Perhaps by then, this solar thermal legend originating from Qinghai and Delinga will become the never-setting sun for many more regions.